Hello, this is Chris Parker and the Business Simplicity podcast. And I just had a really fascinating, deep conversation with Jaroslav Dokoupil, who is a leadership coach and trainer who I've known for many, many years. And we got into a lot of different dimensions of really a purpose driven career and organization. Very rich conversation. But Jaroslav, why do you feel it would be really valuable for people to listen to this?
Thank you, Chris. So it was a great conversation, and we touched upon purposeful careers, but also the concept of leadership, which is, I know, a topic that you care about a lot. And I think those two concepts are very important. The more faster the world is changing around us, the more it's becoming important for people to craft their own unique path throughout all of the madness around us. So the concept of purposeful career and leadership, taking leadership over your career and what you want to do is quite key. And we have discussed some tips and some ideas. So I think it might be helpful for people to explore that.
The Business Simplicity Podcast, where we learn about strategies and tactics to succeed through simplicity, with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Jaroslav Dokoupil, who I've known for quite a few years. I believe we bumped into each other in the Open EXO community, which is exponential organization leaders from literally around the world, which is just a fascinating and vibrant community of thinkers and doers. And that was delightful. We also participated in not really a research, but we wrote a paper together about leadership in exponential times. Maybe I'll put a link to that into the show notes, which was really a fascinating, bringing people together from cross disciplines and having some conversations about what leadership means in these crazy exponential times. And then we published that, which was really really fantastic. And Jaroslav is a coach and a facilitator, internationally experienced, and I'm just absolutely delighted to have you here, Jaroslav. So thank you for joining.
You're welcome, Chris, and it's awesome to be here. I have been following you from the side for a long time and have been always fascinated with the range of things that you go about doing, from movies to books to CIOs and different corporate roles and business roles, startups. So it's awesome to be here.
Yeah, and before we press record, you were commenting about the portfolio career concept, and it really resonated with me because I think that's kind of how I live. Meaning I usually have a main theme, oftentimes what the vocation is, but also have these creative endeavors like the book, Lead from Love with Rumi, which came out recently, and that was of course very much mixed up in who I am professionally. But so what I'd like to do is maybe just grab onto that, and then because we now mentioned the book, um, leading from love and with Rumi and things like that. I wonder if you, as I would say, leadership expert, I think that is a very safe thing to share, and people can discover you at yaroslavdokoupil.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well, and they can see the different ways that you might be able to support them there. But Jaroslav, how would you define the word leadership? Like, what does that word mean for you?
Yeah, so as you say, I've been thinking about leadership and practicing leadership for about 20 years. So for all of my career, it's kind of my topic of choice. And when I was studying at a university, I was part of a student organization for 6 years, actually, 4 years as a volunteer and 2 years full time. And the main focus of the organization was global peace, and then leadership was a key topic towards that. And that's where I really discovered the concept of leadership and started thinking about it. Um, and there was a kind of a fascinating story that for me um, was kind of this moment. Like I tracked that moment, to realize like what leadership means and what it could mean for me. I was at like a leadership development conference for a week, and we were thinking about things like our values and purpose. I was in my early 20s, and we had a speaker come from the UK, and he was a corporate speaker working in learning and leadership development, and he shared with us. It was kind of a motivational speech, so to say, for an hour. And he showed with us at some point. He showed out like a letter, and I was sitting all the way at the back because I always somehow sit at the back. But he was showing us letters. I couldn't see very well, but it was like it was almost like a child writing, and it wasn't very smooth. It was kind of like jagged and stuff. And he was kind of showing this letter, and then he started reading this letter, and it was from a little girl living in an African country. I don't remember specifically the country, but she was writing to like adopted parents in the UK, and it was a letter for Christmas. So they were like like sending letters to each other, and the whole letter was very simple. I mean, it was probably like a 5, 6 years old girl, but she was saying, I'm very grateful that I can be writing to you, and I'm curious like how things are for you. And at the end, she said something like, I know that's Christmas coming, and I don't want anything, but I would like to have a new pen so I can write you more letters, right? So that was like the kind of a thing. And we were like, wow, that's amazing. Like so many kids wish for all of these different things, and she just wants a pen so she can write more letters. And then, he kind of paused, and then he said something that really kind of stayed with me and shocked me. He basically says the reason why the letter is written in such a bad writing is that the girl basically lost both of her arms through a war in her country, and she was writing this letter with her feet,
Mm.
right? So she was writing the letter with her feet. And then he kind of looked at us and he said, like, look at all of you, like you are all from, the top of the world, like top of the population. You're a university student. You can allow yourself to go for 1 week to a place to think about your leadership. Like, who can afford this? And this girl, the only, she's a young girl. She has uh, have a life permanently affected by what has happened to her without her anything, choosing anything. It just kind of happened. And she's learned how to write with her feet, and she's writing this letter. And the only thing she wants is another pen so she can write, more with this family. So he kind of looked at us and says, like, who's gonna make this world better? Like her, probably gonna be very difficult. Like, who else than you can make this world better?
Mm.
And this is like the essence of leadership, right? So I remember, like, from that story, I was walking away from this, and everything that we were like abstractly exploring, like values and purpose. I had my values, my 5 values, and my purpose and everything, but it was all like very abstract and
Mm.
cognitive. But when I heard the story, I was like, this is leadership, right? It is to like invest your personal time and everything and effort to making the world a bit better, right? And I remember I was walking away from that conference room and from that conference saying, I want to lead. Like, I want to make things around me better for people that I meet. I don't know whatever that means, but it was kind of like a decision of I want to serve the world to be better, right? Like, so for me, that is the concept of leadership. Still is the essence of it. So for me, leadership ultimately is about service, serving something beyond yourself. And I do have a definition of leadership. Is something that I work with. So I said that leadership is about improving the status quo, so making things better, and doing so in a way that you are a role model for your character, right? For other people to follow. So
Mm.
that is kind of like you're improving things, but you're also doing it in a certain way that inspires other people to follow you. And you're doing it, you're like a role model for your character. So it has both the destination, but also the path.
Yeah.
How you do it matters. So that's kind of my working definition for leadership.
Well, I think it's beautiful. It's improvement, bettering. What I very much like about it is oftentimes when I talk about leaders, people think about corporate leaders and managers and get shit done type people, and um, and one of my beliefs as I further discover my purpose and mission is that organizations of any kind is the opportunity for us to interact with other humans, and in that interaction with other humans, that's the opportunity for growth and improvement. And this is, I think, where for me, adding to what you're saying is to create that energy or that space for myself to learn and grow, and in doing
Mm,
so, to express that character, as you said, that can be an invitation for others, but also is in a way coaching and helping people through those struggles and even traumas over time. So it's
yeah.
Yeah, no, let's play with it. And then when I was getting into the book process, I was observing more and more what I called lazy leadership, or maybe lazy management would be a better way. And like, so it's very non-empathetic, um, non-purposeful, you know, in this, in some cases, like the mindset was more on bottom line than some sort of nurturing or regenerative approach. And I was like, this is just lazy. You can sit in your office and work with your metrics. And that's how the concept of love came about. And love is sometimes an unusual phrase to hear in management. So I'm curious to play with that and say, like, in the context of business leadership, so not romantic love, what does that word love mean to you in the context of organizational leadership? It doesn't have to be a business, but just like an organizational leadership dynamic. I'm really just fascinated in what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And by the way, congratulations on your book. I think it's a courageous choice to write about love in the context of business. So congratulations on taking that step. I think it definitely belongs there. But I think it's a great step that you have taken. And just before I answer that question, just as a side note, just to say that I think you're completely right. Like the definition that I gave about leadership and this kind of a broader sense that leadership is about service, right? Serving something beyond yourself. I think it's more like a philosophical definition of leadership. Of course, you have leadership roles, and you have leadership in business, you have public leadership, you have all kinds of forms of leadership. But for me, what you said is very key. I think leadership is not so much about a formal role, for me at least. It's much more of an inner decision to lead. And it often starts with leading yourself, just like you mentioned several times in your book. And I think you don't need to have a role in a company or, be a business leader to lead yourself, right? Like it's almost like an attitude towards life. How do you treat life? How do you treat the world around you, right? Do you let kind of the world to knock you down, or do you take responsibility for your own better future and for like improving and working on your character? So that is kind of leadership in its essence. But specifically in business, I think business is an amazing place where there is usually a lot of stress, especially if you're working in a smaller company or a startup. So it kind of puts us against a lot of our own shortcomings. And I think business can be a great place for personal growth, right? And developing yourself if you take it in that way. And business is also an opportunity to lead in terms of serving, the other people that work with you, lifting them up, making them, be better. I once read somewhere that leadership could also be about like making other people better than you, right? Not like kind of bringing them to your level, but actually making them better than you, right? And that is a very interesting kind of definition there. So I think it is about serving other people, serving their growth, serving the organization, serving customers. Ultimately, any business can only be successful if it serves customers. And for me, there is a place of love in all of this, right? Like when you when you serve other people, and again, I think you said romantic love, and that's like one way how we define love, but there is all kinds of other kinds of love that exist. And love meaning that you care about something more than you care about yourself. That is maybe a broader definition of love. And I think there is a lot of place for that in business. You can care for the mission of the organization throughout late nights and early mornings. You can care about personal life of other people that you work with and about helping their careers and helping them to grow, helping them to succeed. So that's an expression of love. You can care about what the company does in the world, how it serves customers, and that itself is an expression of love. So I think there are many, almost on a daily basis, there are many opportunities where you can show love in terms of serving something bigger than yourself. And actually, for me, I love this, like love and leadership, those two topics that you have chosen, because for me, they have a very similar core, which is again about service. Like I think leadership is about service, and love is around making something more important than yourself and your own agenda, your own goals. Like you're prioritizing somebody else. When it's a romantic love, you're prioritizing your partner, right? In some sense, like love only works well when you give to the other
Well, let me
and
grab
they
that
give
and
to you.
and
Yeah,
and, and dive into that because that triggered me a bit. So yes, I can follow that love is making something other than yourself important. For example, the planet. For example, the next generation. For example, your lover. And I believe um, that's only possible if you love yourself and in a way make yourself more important in a very selfish way. I want to love myself. I want to respect myself. I want to nurture myself so that I may serve others.
yeah.
And sometimes that feels contradictory and kind of a paradox to me. But I know in some of your work, it's um, you talk about self leadership. If I
Hmm.
and if we could that be synonymous for self love in a way, or how would you differentiate that?
Yeah, I think self-love is not easy. We all come with different baggages from the way our psyche develops. So, like, fully loving ourselves is not easy. I also think that, at least in my point of view, what you said, the way you said it is exactly the right thing, which is that you need to love yourself to love others. Sometimes I feel there is a lot of stress on loving yourself, and the love others is like somehow missing. Because I think the ultimate goal is not to love yourself. Period. Like if that's where you finish, you love yourself. I don't think that is leadership.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Is
Um,
like um,
I think it's
well,
necessary to love others, but you
uh,
cannot finish
yeah,
with the love
this
yourself part, right? Because
I
then
hope not, or else we would all just sit down and meditate
exactly.
into a little puddle, because there is a innate need, I believe, for people
Hmm.
to create and play and interact and frolic and sometimes we do that in the form of a business organization, but
Hmm.
yeah, and then being free and empathetic to yourself. If you have that freedom within, I believe that that is the space where playful creation can come from. So it's
Yeah, I agree. I mean that is a lot. You can go also the other way where you only serve others and like the love yourself part is not there. You might not have the proper boundaries. You just overgive yourself all the time, and you leads to burnout, etc. So there is definitely element of that. But I think it's important to have this balance of things because sometimes, there is a lot about self-care and self-love and everything. But when it stops with you, I think that's like you're getting a half of it, right? But you're not getting the second half. And there is something, psychologists have researched this, but there is something very powerful that happens when you give yourself to something beyond yourself. Um, I think when we are going through difficult times, we go very insular and we are in our minds,
mm,
and it becomes almost like a loop that is very hard to overcome. But even like in the worst moments, if you meet somebody or talk to somebody, like, you know, um, it helps you to get over the difficult times because the focus is not on you. Like you only can like a lot of the difficult things are inside because you're focusing all the time on within and it's hard to get out of the mind. But when you actually serve somebody, like do something, go play sports or go help somebody or talk to somebody, help them, support them. Like when you do something that is outward oriented, it helps you immediately to get away from like too much focus on yourself, right? So I think that like love myself to love others needs to be always in its entirety. And then in
mm,
business, as you say, this is maybe a little bit philosophical and esoteric, but in business, there is a lot of opportunities to do that. How you tell the story of your company, which is marketing. How do you serve your customers, which is your product? How do you build up your team, right? And there are many very practical ways that you can show that love, to others and service of others. So I think business is a great avenue for that.
you're reminding me of, and it's a blog post I read of yours while preparing for this, around the integral theory, which is I
Hmm.
think individual and collective and interior and exterior, or
You got it right. Yeah.
and um what's resonating with me is these are all true, meaning
Yeah.
You can't be only external focus nor only internal focus. And in that playful space, that's where the magic happens. And with this, I'm going to grab onto a quote. And in this season of the podcast, because it's fun, as I've been asking people to share with me their favorite Rumi quote. Do you have it in front of you? Would you like to share it and then maybe express why this was your favorite Rumi quote, or why it triggered you, inspired you at the moment?
Yes. So the quote, if I'm not saying it incorrectly, is beyond the feeling of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field, and I will find you there. And if I know correctly, it's part of a longer poem that that Rumi has written, and actually speaks about the concept of soul. Kind of after this, let me maybe see if I can pull up the full one. Right. So, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other does not make any sense.
What does that mean to you?
So it's one of these quotes that you can look at it in so many different ways, and it can have so many different meanings. But I think the way he understood it, and I don't know Rumi that much. I have done some research. In fact, I had a conversation with ChatGPT, asked it to be Rumi, and I asked some questions, and I had a conversation with a virtual version of Rumi yesterday. But if I understand correctly, he had this sense of the beloved, which maybe we would link to a concept of God. And he also the concept of soul, and the way he was linking these things together is basically like the beloved is the creator of everything. It's in everywhere, it's in everything, so in all of us, etc. And then the metaphor actually ChatGPT gave me yesterday, which I quite liked, was that the beloved is like the ocean and the soul is like the drop of water in the ocean, right? So the soul is kind of like uniquely your own expression, um, like your own unique part of the beloved, and the beloved is this kind of a bigger thing that is in everything and in everywhere. And I've been actually studying this and thinking about this quite some time, and it really fits my definition as well. So I think that's what he means by soul, kind of your own unique expression and contribution to the world. Now, the quote itself, though, it's very powerful because we are in a kind of a paradoxical situation. You and I talk to each other, we are using language, but language itself is not neutral. It has its own structure, how it structures our thinking and what we say, and how it structures the world between us, right? We are defining it through language. And at some point, maybe if Neuralink is successful, we might find other ways to communicate with each other. But for now, language is the main way to do that. But language has lot of advantages, but it also has certain limitations. And I think one of the things that is particular to language is that it creates distinctions. So if I say something is good, then also something is bad. If I say something is up, then something is down. Like language exists in the world of opposites and contradictions, and it kind of slices reality as something that is undivisible into divisions, right? And I think what he's pointing at is that when we do that, when we have like right things and good things and bad things and right things and wrong things, like when we do that, we can actually get lost in the world of language, but that's not where the soul is. That's not where true understanding of reality lies. And in this quote, I think he's inviting people to go beyond language to a direct experience of their world. And in that beyondness, which is actually like impossible to describe in language, because what it means beyond language, how can you describe something that is beyond language in language, right? Like it's something that you need to really like live and experience. But when you do that, you are then able to get in touch with your soul, which is your unique place, and also with the divine or the beloved or however you call that. But that itself is something that is direct experience. It's not something you can very well describe. Um, so I think that is the invitation. He's saying there is the whole world that you are not looking into when you're all the time caught in the linguistic distinctions and your linguistic world that you've created. Um,
I
and
think, yeah, I
he's
think
inviting people to that world. Yeah.
connecting. I love it. You chatted with Rumi and GPT. I think that's fun. Maybe I should try that. But the coming back to this integral theory that I'm not really familiar with, but I'm naively applying it to this. That at least in my own personal journey through meditation, reflection, and calm, self-love, self-empathy, I see less need for judgment in my outer world. And then when I see less judgment and think less judgment, which is not always easy, and I'm not sure if that is actually the goal, then that gives even more peace within me. Because if I'm out in the world judging, oh, that is right, that is wrong, and that is right, and having some emotional reaction to that, and because it's outside of me, essentially I have very little control or agency. I could dedicate myself to solve some wrong or express some sort of good, which is part of the playful creation. That there is this cycle in this evolution. So it's no, I love it that you dove into that and you played around with that. And something that's very important to you is the concept of purpose. And I'm wondering, through this evolution, in this space between right and wrong, in this space between I and you and we, and one of the services you provide is if I understand it correctly, is like a purpose-driven career or a purposely designed career. Can we slide down the slide a little bit more and swim around in that, and
Sure.
And how can we mix leadership and love and beyond the idea of right doing and wrongdoing into how can someone connect to their purpose and attach that to their vocation and find meaning and joy and satisfaction in that? I'm curious.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I have actually been reflecting on this a lot because when I was very early on in my career, in fact, before I kind of took a first job, so to say, I have decided that I will always live my career on purpose. So that means reflecting what your purpose is, and then also finding ways that it can be expressed in a practical ways, as in terms of your career, your roles, etc. And purpose in its essence is asking like, why am I here? Why I do what I do? It can have different layers to that. But I think it's something very important. And as you and I both know, with AI, a lot of the things that are happening in the job market and kind of roles and a lot of things changing. I think the concept of asking yourself what do you want to do and why you want to do it, what your purpose is becoming more important than ever before. And I think it can somehow be like a harbor, in the rapidly changing world where you're asking, well, I don't know what jobs will exist in 5 to 10 years. I don't know like what will be exactly how the economy will look like. I don't know how, like maybe they're just AI driven companies and AI run companies, and do we actually have a place as humans? And we're exploring these big questions, right, about how human goes together with AI, but also, like AI replacing humans and all that kind of stuff. So we are exploring these big questions. But I think one big antidote to that is to consciously reflect on your own unique path within all of this and reflecting on your sense of purpose. And that's why I've, designed a program. It's a 2 months program. There's basically helping people to design their career based on their purpose. And the way I look at this is I have coached hundreds of people, throughout 20 years of developing leaders in companies and also talking to people, outside of companies and working with small business owners and entrepreneurs, etc. And in all of those conversations, career usually comes up as a topic. And what I have seen is that is almost, if you think of it like a 2x2 matrix with 4 quadrants, on the horizontal axis, you could have like financial viability, like can I make my career viable? can I sustain myself doing this career? And on the vertical axis, you have fulfillment. So is this career meaningful to me? Is it giving me a sense of fulfillment? And when you kind of split that, you can have careers that are high in viability but low in fulfillment. So I'd call it like an empty success, right? So you are earning a lot of money, like it's all great, but it's not fulfilling for you. On the opposite of that, you can have a high fulfillment but low viability, which means you're struggling financially, and usually you don't need to do something else to sustain yourself, or you need to abandon that career completely, and it's kind of like an unfulfilled dream. Of course, you can have low fulfillment and low viability, so that's probably where nobody wants to be. But the purpose of a career I define as high viability and high fulfillment is when you have both of these covered, right? So it is able to sustain you and your loved ones and your family and whatever you want to sustain, whoever you want to sustain, but at the same time, it gives you a sense of fulfillment. And it's not trivial to find this, but I think ultimately it's the most meaningful way that you can live your career. And it's also antidote to a lot of the changes kind of that are happening around us when you actually take ownership and responsibility over your own career, and you basically design your career from that place. So that's maybe kind of a little bit around that, if that
Yeah.
explains.
And how do you do that with yourself? To maybe to put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
With all these changes and all the uncertainties in the world, which I think maybe there's always been change and uncertainty in the world, so I don't think it's anything necessarily new, but I feel it's accelerating, at least in my lifetime. And indeed, if people are grounded in feeling safe and secure, purposeful in themselves, then at least the stress of all the change can be minimized. But can you give an example with yourself? How have you designed your career based on your deep intent or your purpose?
Yeah. So very early on, I spoke to you about that conference, and part of being at that conference was also thinking about my purpose and what that is. And the way I articulated at the time was to develop myself and others. That was my purpose. So basically, I need to grow myself, and then I will share that growth with other people and help other people to develop. So with that kind of a purpose, my role was being a trainer and a coach and leadership trainer. And I have done that first within the organization with young people, and then I have done it in a corporate sphere. So I have worked with a lot of large companies, designing basically large scale leadership programs, a lot of work with HSBC and a few other companies. And as I was developing others, I was attending personal development seminars and different things. I was reading books. I was studying leadership, studying personal development, because I always felt that for me to have integrity, helping other people to grow, I need to take my medicine first and grow as well. So that was the expression of developing myself and others. And I had that for about 10 years. And then at some point, something interesting happened that maybe is not so much spoken. I think there is a lot of resources for you to define your purpose. A lot of people are speaking about this. But what is interesting, what happened for me is that at some point, that purpose felt kind of stale, right? So I've been doing that for 10 years. And I kind of felt like this is great. I was flying all around the world. I was developing leaders. I was loving it. It was great. But I somehow felt that maybe there is a bigger version of my purpose that is somewhere there, and it's not it. It's not I felt like I cannot do developing myself and others for the next 20 years because that itself would become empty for me. And it was really strange because I was finding it hard to find some support, because when you talk to somebody, what do you mean? You traveling around the world and you're doing what you love? Look at me, I'm here stuck, So I didn't find a lot of understanding for people who were well, what else do you want? You already have everything, So it was not easy, and I went through kind of a year or two where I felt really lost, and I didn't know, and I did a few things, and I met a few people, and I remember a funny story. I went to a conference in London. I was living in London at the time, and I went to a little conference, and it was at a conference room upstairs, and there was a woman downstairs that was taking registration, and she was ticking off, who is attending and who is not. And I was looking at the book, and I was going through it, and I was I can't find myself. I couldn't find my name. And she looked me straight in the eye and says, "One day you will." And I was like, how weird kind of a thing. I was in this, place where I was looking for my next purpose, and I didn't know like what that is.
Yeah.
And I'm at this conference and she just looks at me and said, "One day you will." And she was right, by the way. Um, but I just think it was a very odd thing to say in the way she said it. It's almost as, I don't know. I don't know how it works. Sometimes who knows how the world works. But anyway, so I did a few things, including actually going on a vision quest. So I was in nature and in the desert in the US actually for 4 days alone without eating, just drinking. And I wanted to create kind of a space beyond just a journaling exercise to really reflect on, who am I,
Mm.
and kind of get in touch with my own soul. We spoke about soul and Rumi beforehand. And what came out of all of this process was this whole understanding of that, my purpose is around creating a better future, like doing something broader than just developing people, but actually contributing to a better future for the world. And when that understanding arrived, then it was happening very fast. I came up with these people called futurists. I was like, wow, you can be a futurist, you can study future and
Mm.
everything. And it's not something that was on my radar at all before, because I was in the world of coaches and trainers and
Mm.
stuff. But suddenly, like, futurist, and I started researching, and I found Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil is one futurist. And I applied actually to Singularity University, and I spent the summer there in 2012, where I actually met Salim, who we both know. And I started this whole like other chapter of my career, which was around future of technology, future of business, future of leadership. And for the last 8 years, besides my leadership development work, I've also been helping Salim to build a global community and train people in innovation, business models, and things. So but it was all grounded in that inquiry into
Mm.
my purpose, and saying like, developing people is not, I want to do something bigger, and then something bigger arrive, and then things happen over time. And I think I would not have had that like other part of my career that I have now, had I just stayed with the original purpose. So I think maybe the lesson in that is that, yes, defining purpose is very important. And at some point, when you've like fully lived up your one version of purpose, there is a deeper one waiting, and you can tap into that as well. And that itself can be a source of external changes, right? So
Yeah.
like these inner things can then become a source of another roles, another jobs, another things. Um, and yeah, so
Well,
that's kind of one way I've done it. Yeah.
I mean, we're not static. I mean, we're evolving, and so, and if you've
Yeah.
explored and played in something, and the first time that you eat a piece of chocolate, it probably explodes in your mouth, but the 10,000th time, it's like, okay, M&M. Um, you have to go off and
Yeah.
discover something else, some other place. No, it's interesting. You're at Singularity 2012, because I was there in 2011. In a
I
way,
didn't even know that. That's great. I didn't know that.
also exploring myself, because I was at 10 years with LeasePlan at the time, and as a very young, early in my career, but CIO of a global financial services
Mm.
organization. At that time, deciding to leave and deciding where to go. I do remember um, that was the first time that I even heard of the concept of a driverless car, and we were able to not drive in, but sit in one of those early, I think it was a Toyota Prius version of the Google car. And LeasePlan, well, it's a fleet management, it's a bank, but the reason it's a bank is because it has a couple million cars that are leased out. And I was like, driverless cars, my whole professional world is doomed. like okay, what do you do with this? And if you would have asked me then, I would have imagined driverless cars would have been more prolific at this time, but that will definitely come.
I think it is coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're exactly right, Chris. I wanna show you something funny. Oh, I can't share my screen,
Oh, okay.
but
Allowed. And if people are listening, sorry, you're gonna have to go check out on YouTube and see this. But oh
so
wow,
this is a picture of me, pure pictures from Singularity University, and this one is, I think, what you're talking about. So they visited our campus in 2012 with this
yeah.
car, and this is this is one of the ones. So just thought it's funny that you're
Well,
talking
but
about
I'm
it.
I'm wondering, because it's in front of the same exact building on that campus,
Yeah.
and I left LeasePlan in 2012. 11. So I'm wondering, maybe we're at the same place at the same time, but I'm pretty sure I was the year before. But no,
Yeah.
incredible. And the things that I still like to play with is and this is more just my intellectual, playful self. How do you take technologies to create more rich human experiences, like particularly in customer experience design? How to make interacting with companies suck less. And that's kind of like over on one edge. But what I have realized is, being a CIO, CTO, and involved in technology, is the technology will only behave as an output as much as the people who make it are connected, positive, creative, free. Because if you have an organization which is and this is like Conway's law, if you're not familiar with Conway's law is basically a software landscape will follow the shape of the human organization that built it. And so if you have a lot of silos that aren't communicating and there's not stream between them, then your software application, your landscape will be segregated and siloed and broken. And if you want to create a process that has systems involved and humans involved and different stakeholders involved, then you should also organize for that and create a bit the atmosphere or the culture in that organization that you would like the technology to exhibit. And so for me, this is where I play with that because people want to create. People want to create with technology, and my belief is, if you're creating from a positive, playful, and therefore ethical, therefore caring, therefore loving space, then the technology will behave in the similar way. Of course, people can do bad things with technology, but people can do bad things with anything. So it's
But it's something that, I really actually agree with, and it's maybe something that is not so much spoken about. But you mentioned the integral quadrants before, the integral theory, and just for everybody to know, I think you summarized it very well. But in a sense, like reality has 4 dimensions, and is the internal and the external dimension. So internal, like my thoughts and beliefs and my values, like things that you cannot see, and external dimension is my behavior that you can see, or even my body, my neurophysiology, etc. And that's on the individual level, but you have the same on a collective. So invisible or internal collective is things like culture and shared norms and beliefs, etc. And then external are things like processes and structures, and all of these things. And I think that is something when you're building technology or when you're actually doing anything in the world, is that it originates in the space within you, and then somehow your sense of the world and your understanding of the world becomes encoded in the artifact that you create. So many of us love books, or even like listening to podcasts and things. And I think for me, always reading books, I read a lot of books when I was young, like mostly science fiction actually and fantasy books, but I read a lot of books when I was young. And for me, it was almost always like entering a world of another person through the words, right? Like it was never just about the words, it was entering that. And I think the reason why it happens is that something happens when we take from something from within and we formulate it, and somehow the creation that we make reflects who we are and what we believe in. Is actually, as a side note, I find this difficult with ChatGPT and other tools. When I read a text written by ChatGPT, I don't feel a person behind it. I don't feel, it's like kind of like soulless comes to mind. Like it feels like it doesn't have, it's not the same as reading something that was written by a human. Like I can feel the difference somehow between those two. But in any case, leading to what you said, I think is the same for technology. So I think intention really matters, and why we build our things matters, and why we build technology matters. So if the technology is built to earn a lot of money for me, and exploit markets or exploit people, in all these kind of ways, I think that's what it's going to do. But if as you say, like we work on the individuals, or on the individual level, we create something because the intention is to add something to the world, is to help other people, is to make the world more human or more interesting or a better place to be. I really think it somehow matters on intangible levels. Maybe it's not a feature on a page or something, but I do think that these kind of things matter. And then actually maybe just as a second thing to say, like it leads me to what I got to in my career and my purpose. So I realized that at the end of the day, actually, I can most impact still individuals, right? It's like a full circle. Like it's great to be thinking about big technologies and AI and the world and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, me as an individual, I can most impact other individuals, right? And for me, it all came back, like everything that I have done, it comes back to the concept of leadership. And I define my purpose now as empower leadership. And I want to take everything that I have learned about leadership and about the world and all these kind of things and make it accessible to as many people as possible. I have like a private goal to impact 1 million people by 2030 with what I have learned about leadership and bring all of these strands together, but work on that individual level. And I think if we evolve ourselves as leaders, then our technology also will evolve. And if we see leadership as a service, also our technology will be serving others. So I think there is a big opportunity in that, how to create a more livable and kind of a friendly future despite all of these different changes, is if we take personal responsibility to shape the future in that way from the position of leadership.
Yeah, I like this individual and collective, meaning if the goal of the individual is to solely earn money, and if it's the goal of the organization, the business organization, to only earn money, then you will find it a soulless place. It'll be a dry place. It'll be a GPT type place. And when I love looking at organizations that are more purpose driven, that if you're solving a problem, if you're doing a service, a soulful service, then the profits will be a result, not a goal. It's an outcome. So Jaroslav, if you want to impact 1 million people, was it 1 million people by 2030? Well, hopefully this podcast has contributed, made a little dent in that ambition. So if people are listening, please share this around, and then we can help Jaroslav make that reach. And I'd also say really heartfelt thanks, meaning you've been on my list and I've been kind of lightly scratching and teasing you for quite a while to say, hey, when are you going to get on here and have this conversation? This has been delightful. And I would suggest, and if you are triggered by the possibility of designing a purposeful career, look at jaroslavdokoupil.com, and that is going to be in the show notes, so you can find it there. Also on LinkedIn, I'll put his LinkedIn profile link there as well. And please reach out to him, and I'm sure with his experience and care and personality, you'll find some breakthroughs and some ways to improve your own professional career. So Jaroslav, thank you so much for this conversation. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm a big fan of what you do and all your different projects. It's always a delight to connect, and thank you for hosting me in your space, and my greetings to all of your listeners. We'll be very happy to connect.
Thank you for listening. Visit ebullient.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.